Hello everyone and welcome for another video of Love and Wargame. In this video, we will take a look at the latest box for the Commonwealth, the Rikhter Battlefleet Set. This was highly anticipated, lots of great models in there. So what we are going to do, we're going to have a look at what is in the box, what you can build with it, each option, and then I will also give you some tips on what you can get on top of that to make the most balanced and efficient fleet as possible. First, before we do all of that, I just wanted to remind older players and to inform newer players of what is the playstyle of the Commonwealth, and especially the Russians, since this is a Russian box. All the Commonwealth in general, these are quite tough ships. You have a lot of access to ablative armor, which basically means that you can prevent your opponent from rolling certain number of additional dices when they make explosives, depending on your mass, always good. And you also get quite often the rule quantity is a quality, which means that when your units die, some of them, you have a chance to be able to summon more basic units from the reserve coming from some sides. So it is a little bit a roll of the luck to first generate these reinforcements and then to get them on the board, but it's something that to always have in mind is that the most basic units, Rurik frigates and Kutsov cruisers, you can get some of them for free during the game just by losing some other units, so that is quite good. The Russian ships in general are very tough for their point cost, like they're very resilient. The other nations in the Commonwealth are the Ukrainians. They have a lot of submarines, some very efficient submarines by the way, and there is also, but those have not been released yet, the Polish-Lithuanians, which will be focused mostly on airships. And then of course there is the mercenary subfaction, which is actually the most detailed mercenaries that we have in the game actually. Currently, I mean, and those are the Black Wolf mercenaries. I will not talk about them too much here, except maybe in the expansion part. One thing that is very interesting to say here also is that the Russians have a lot of cryogenerators and railguns. We'll talk about it a lot later, but to sum it up, cryogenerators allow you to try to generate some icebergs, some islands to block your opponents. Fine, but they especially can do a very powerful blast attack at closing range or point blank with devastating, and this is really powerful. Like it can get sustained on some ship, like it's just such a good attack, the cryogenerators. And there is also the newer version, the shockwave generator, but we'll talk about it more in detail. And the other specific type of weapon they have is railguns. They can put it like basically everywhere. These are weapons that shoot exactly the same, either at point blank, long range, extreme range, whatever. They are very stable, and they can shoot at extreme range. This means that the Russians can stay a little bit in the back, shoot at extreme range, and force the enemy to come to them, and they will still be very efficient even at point blank after they engage each other, at point blank indeed. So you can focus the ships of the Russians to be good at any range, like the Commonwealth in general, but especially the Russians we're going to talk about today. However, it means that you put some specific loadouts on your ship, or you use some very specific units. The Russians have great units for point blank with some amazing drilling units or like boarding units. That's great. They can also have very good extreme range game with torpedoes and railguns, or great closing range with some very powerful heavy gun batteries and the cryogenerators and stuff. So you can really do a lot with this faction. However, it needs to be focused. Like you cannot have a fleet that does everything extremely well. You have to focus during your list building on what you want to do, but the Commonwealth can do everything, so there is some replayability there. Alright, so what do you get inside the Rikhter box? First you have the Russian Dreadnought, which we can see here built as the Rikhter. There are three variants, the Rikhter, the Prezidium, and the Moskva. We'll have a look at all of them. You also have two of these Russian Frontline cruisers, quite old designs, like they were with the original launch box of the new version of Dystopian Wars. They're still very good. There have been a couple of upgrades to the kit since then. 4 different variations with which you can build. Then the newest kids on the block are the Russian aerial cruisers. 3 variations. You see here the picture of the Tunguska, but you can also have these, the Irkutsk and the Saransk, and those are very interesting, like very different. We'll talk about them more. You also have in the box 4 Rurik frigates, classic. Also got a little upgrade for their gun batteries, but still very good little ships. You have the newest here, the new Hovercrafts. 3 variants, the Yak, the Guiana, and the Zubar. I don't know why it's written all in capital letters, Zuber, but I guess it means something. We will say what they do, but they are very interesting. They are mass ones, actually, so we'll talk about them more. And finally, in this box, you have 4 escort tokens, those nickels here. Those will not talk too much about it, but do remember that when we say like, yeah, you can put some escort tokens on your ship, this is what we mean. It just gives them a little defense boost and offensive boost at point blank. Those are what you use to represent that you have some escorts. And they're very, very cute. I like them very much. So the first ship that we'll talk about is the Moskva Dreadnought, and as you can see, it is a massive ship. It is approximately the size of the Borodino. It is a little bit bigger, larger, and longer, but not that much. It is still a Mass 3 ship, which is good, and it is really made to just devastate anything at point blank. It costs 311 points, and you do get a lot for it. You have 3 frontal heavy gun batteries. Okay, that's good. You get focus gunnery, so a little bit more dices and rerolling blanks. That is great. You have 2 heavy torpedo salvos, so even at extreme range you're not defenseless at all. And you have 2 of the smaller turrets that can be like rocket batteries, seismic mortars, or even railguns. So that's good, and the big attraction is going to be the shockwave generator that is right there. It's a great weapon, especially with the sonic amplifier, which means that you use the larger template and it's very powerful, basically. However, the range is not amazing. You need to be very close to use the shockwave generator at maximum efficiency, which is not the case with the Borodino. Which could put its blast template anywhere within 20 inches. The shockwave is much harder to use at longer range. Like, you really need to be right in front of the opponent, and this makes the Moskva a little bit harder ship to use than the Borodino. And it also goes with the fact that it's, like I say, it's tough but not invulnerable. Like, it does have Ablatiev armor at mass 3, so 3 explosives will not provoke additional rolls for your opponents. That is good. And it has elite crew, which is good in offense but also in defense. Great. However, it will be able to be focused down. Like, it has armor 8 and citadel 16, which is usual for battleships, but it has 10 hull points before it gets crippled, and then 5 more, which is higher than most battleships. However, it's not either like invincible. It doesn't have any defensive generator, no shroud, no shield, nothing, and it means that it will get focused down and shot down fast by a determined opponent. I would recommend to put escorts and an attached unit. For example, the Rurik that we will see later, you can attach 2 of them to this ship. It will boost a little bit the firepower, it will give some defensive bonuses, and I would recommend to put all your nickel escorts that we've seen just before, put them all in the Moskva, or the different variants that we'll see just after, because they will attract a lot of firepower, and the escorts can really help to defend. So it needs a little bit of touch to how to be played. It's not like the Borodino, where you put it in the middle and it will just do the business in every direction. The Moskva, you need to be a little bit more careful. It is tough. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, it will not get shot down by 1 cruiser and 2 frigates, but it is not as tough as it can look. So be careful, and you really want to be in point blank with it. First for the shockwave generator, and also because it has good boarding capacity with elite crew and all the escorts and attached units you can put. But either you hide it a little bit, let's say you don't take the enemy fleet head on, and you kind of like slalom between the islands to go at your ideal range, or even better, you can put it in strategic reserves, which means that on the turn 2, when it arrives, it will arrive where you want it to be from one side of the board, and then you will be able to move and shoot and use your generator at full efficiency and ram something and then do a boarding action. Like, it's going to be much easier because you do have 2 heavy torpedo salvos. It's not nothing, but is it worth attracting firepower for 2 turns just to send some torpedoes? I'm not sure. It's gonna be a little bit tricky, or you put all railguns, so you stay at extreme range and you use the shockwave generators as a deterrent to tell to the enemy, okay, if you get close, I will get close to you as well and use my shockwave generator, but the main offensive power is going to be the 3 tri-railguns and the 2 heavy torpedo salvos. And with focus gunnery, I mean, 3 railguns, if you can trigger the heavy firepower, it's no joke either. It's also another way to play it, which can be fine. But as we will see, if you have this hull of a ship. If you buy this box and you want to play it as an extreme range ship, there is a little better variant that we'll see in a second. But first, let's talk about the Prezidium. Do not underestimate the Prezidium. It is a very good ship. It is tougher than the Moskva for the point. First of all, it's cheaper. Okay, good. And it trades a heavy gun battery for shield generator, which is very good. It's what this ship wants, like defensively, because ablative armor would make the shroud a little bit redundant. This means that it is quite tough. Let's remember that the Moskva does not have the option to replace one heavy gun battery with a shield, or with a generator anyway. So it's quite good for the Prezidium. It means that this ship is going to be tough. It's going to remove 3 dice from your opponent's dice pool and then prevent 3 explosives from being rolled. It starts to be a lot. And it still has like the heavy torpedo salvos, the 2 heavy gun batteries, some additional weapons. Like it's still a good ship. Like it is a battleship. Like it will hold the center good. But what it wants to do is to stay not in the center, but maybe a little bit in the back from the center, because it has so many utilities that it can give. Like I think it is probably like one of the best support ship in the game, maybe the best support ship in the game, period. It has inspirational, which we don't care, let's not talk about it. It does almost nothing. You have command codes, which means that once per turn you can give a full reroll to a unit within the range. That is huge. Full rerolls are very, very rare. You have logistical support, so more cards, great. You have priority signal, so when you do trigger your heavy firepower and you really want it to trigger, you can make it work. That is a very powerful ability. You have advanced radar relay, which is also good, but it's a little bit harder to trigger. Because you need to be close to the enemy, and the Prezidium doesn't really want that, even though it can. It's a little bit harder, depending on the scenario that you play. If you play Fog of War, for example, especially the newer version of Fog of War, this is going to be very interesting to have this. And finally, there's Supply Depot, so it can reload all your ships around, especially if you have Stoletovs or the airship that we'll see later that have a lot of weapons, but they can run out of munitions fast. Supply Depot really helps. So remember that we will talk about the flying ship that has a lot of Katyushas. Remember that they go very well next to the Prezidium. And yeah, the Prezidium really wants to be just basically in the back of your fleet and just supporting everyone. It plays better at higher points game, because if you play at a very small game scale, like it's going to be a lot of points for a ship that is not that efficient offensively. But if you start to play at 1,000 points, it starts to be okay. 1,500 is even better, and at 2,000 points you want it every day. It is a very good ship. And one thing that I could recommend, actually, my little tips, is to replace all the weapons that you see, the heavy gun batteries and the rocket batteries, replace everything with the railguns. Small railguns, heavy tri-railguns, all the railguns you can do, because this ship wants to be at extreme range. Not to be a damage dealer, but because it wants to stay alive, because it will, with all the support it gets, it's going to attract a lot of firepower, and this way you can really stay far from the opponent, shoot all your railguns, use heavy firepower that will go off thanks to priority signal, and you have 2 heavy torpedo salvos, and you're very tough. Like, you will survive, you should, except if the opponents give you like 25 SRS tokens, then it might start to be tough. But this is another reason why you should put 4 escort tokens on this guy, and also give him some Ruriks, for example, and keep the Russian flying cruiser next as well, because they have flag barrage and heavy escorts. So all in all, we can start to see the combo that is very obvious. Prezidium, a lot of escorts, some aerial cruisers, and just shoot at the enemy from extreme range. Talking about extreme range, this thing is insane. It has this huge cannon, which is magnificent. Like, I mean, look at the size of it. If you have a look at the artwork, it is huge. You can see some guys like just running around, like some sailors. This thing is huge. It is beautiful. It really reminds me of the Chandelier if you've ever played Ace Combat, the 6th one. This is exactly the Chandelier, which means it's very cool by default. It is 22 dices, devastating at extreme range. I mean, just like this, like, we can stop the review here. Like, this is already huge. Like, extreme range, 22 dices, devastating. There are not many ships that will not get a catastrophic explosion out of it. Plus, it has 2 heavy torpedo salvos as well, of course, which means that at extreme range, it will absolutely obliterate anything that is in front of him. and just because it really wants to be at extreme range, you can give it a full reverse every turn, which means you will not even drift forward without disorders. So it can just you can just put it in the corner of the table and full reverse every turn. It will not move and it will just obliterate a couple things every turn. That is a very, very powerful ship, and it's, you know what, it's even cheaper. It's 271 points, and this guy has a shield generator just like the Prezidium, and we've seen the Prezidium was already quite tough, and it also has a magnetic generator, so you don't even care that much from SRS token, because yeah, sure. The one weakness it has, and yeah, the weakness is that when it gets crippled, so you do need to shoot at it quite a while. When it gets crippled, then the Apocalypse Cannon gets limited. So it means on a blank it runs out of ammunition. It is fine, but if it's crippled, you can probably deal a killing blow just after. And yeah, I'm not sure it will survive like 2 turns after being crippled, because then it would need to first shoot the Apocalypse Cannon once after it becomes crippled, then roll a blank, 1 chance out of 6, and then it needs to survive all the way to the next turn to really make it so that this limited rule has an impact. I wouldn't count on this if you play against a Rikhter to save you. Just if it is crippled, just finish it. So I don't know. I'm not sure how to review this. It sounds like the kind of ship that it's very hard to judge on paper because it sounds so powerful and so hard to deal with for not that much in terms of points. However, it is very slow. Like, I mean, you cannot try to stay away out of range or try to be like it will have a line of sight on you if it wants to. Like, I mean, if you go out in the open ocean. But it is slow. It is hard to maneuver. And yeah, you can probably hide behind islands, make sure it does not see you, and this is going to be your way to stay alive from the Rikhter. Like, make sure it doesn't see you, basically. And while it is very resilient to shooting and to even air attacks, if you have some units like submarauders or units in strategic reserve and stuff, you can try to attack it, especially units that can ram it, use ramming actions, so it cannot use its shield generator or magnetic, etc. It will really not appreciate it. We will see later some drills that are very good in this, but if you have, I don't know, some Prussian robots or Russian robots or like these centipedes from the Covenant, all these things that are very good ramming weapons, those are going to be very, very efficient against the Rikhter, and probably your best bet at dealing with this beast. Alright, now we go into the meat and potatoes of the box, which are the Russian frontline cruisers. They are no-nonsense cruisers. They are very standard, and yeah, they're just basically good. We have the Kutsov, which is such a nice little design. It's a cute little ship. 90 points, armor 6, citadel 12, 4 hull points in battle ready, and 4 hull points when crippled. Very standard, but it has ablative armor 2. Because it is mass 2, which means that the first 2 explosives will not roll additional dices. That is good, it's not nothing. It does get the quantity is a quality roll, which is good, and it is one of the 2 units that you can summon back with this roll, which means that when you build this box, if you don't have a Kutsov yet, I would always recommend to have at least 1 Kutsov ready, and to take it with you when you go to play, because there is a chance that you will summon some Kutsov for free during the battle. So having at least 1 is good. Other than that, nothing really special about the Kutsov. It's really basic and boring, but it does the job. Just don't count on it to just win the battle by itself. Then you have the No Risk, which is much more expensive. You can see it's 121 points per model, quite an increase. It does get an extra hull points at battle ready, which is good. It will cripple slow layer. It gets heavy broadside, which means it's very good at point blank. And it gets a small gun battery to the front, very good, and it gets focused gunnery. Okay, we start to see how we want to play. This is a ship that wants to show its side to the enemy because it has every broadside, and then it can link its 3 gun batteries, 2 heavies and 1 normal, to the enemy. So it really wants to be on the side, and focused gunnery means it's going to do the business. Either you keep all gun batteries, and then it's going to be a good ship, cheap-ish, or you really go the extra mile and you give it all the railguns, 2 big and 1 small. It's going to be expensive, but then it's really going to be efficient and tough and like just a good ship. So basically, point blank brawler, keep it with all the gun batteries. if you want it to be like more like in your deployment zone and shooting from very far away, put it all the railguns. But as we will see, if you want all the railguns, there may be some other ships that are a bit better. Then we go to the Oleg, which is dirt cheap. It's 65 points, one of the cheapest cruiser in the entire game. It's almost as tough as the Kutsov. It just has Citadel 11 instead of Citadel 12, but it's still very tough, like for the point cost. It is cheap and tough. It will not kill the enemy fleet by itself, but you can either keep it as a cheap activation with a heavy gun battery, it's fine. You can even make it a very tough objective holder. You give it a shield generator, and for 55 points you have this ship that will not die, ablative armor 2, shield generator mass 2, and 55 points. Like, it's just wasting points if you shoot at it at this point. Or it can be very offensive and threatening. You give it a fury generator, it will go fast at the opponent at 55 points again per cruiser. You don't really want to waste your firepower shooting at it, but at point blank, at boarding range, this thing will board stuff and do some damage and shoot with its broadside. So very cheap, and like they say, quantity is a quality. You can spam the board with Olegs and just take all the objectives and board your opponents. It is a valid strategy. So yeah, very cheap cruiser, quite good. And then finally we go to the Cineus. This thing is a bit more expensive, 75 points, but it has a better hull points, like it has 5 hull points in battle ready and 3 in crippled, which is the same amount in total as the Oleg, but it cripples a little bit later, which is good. It is fast, like it has Vanguard and full steam ahead, which means that with its default, like it can do 18 inches on the first turn if you include the Vanguard move. That is very fast for this game, let me tell you, especially for a cruiser. It has a special rule, which is seismic pounding, giving you extra 2 dice for your seismic mortars. It does sound fun, but the seismic mortar is not that great anymore. You could make a little fun, like there is something to do, like if you want to keep your seismic mortar, it's fine, but I would keep it either with heavy gun battery and gun battery as a very fast ship that will go on the flank, or to make it a cheap railgun boat with a tri-railgun and a smaller railgun. And you can put the Vanguard on the flank and still shoot across the board at extreme range, and even if you get at point blank, it can still fight quite efficiently thanks to the railguns. So yeah, 2 ways to play with it. You can try to make the seismic pounding rule work, but it does take a little bit more work and thought, while just keeping it with railguns make it very efficient all the time. And now we talk about the newest ships, the Russian aerial cruisers. We will start with the Tunguska, which is the most basic default version, 118 points. It's basically a Kutsov, much more expensive as you can see. It's like, yeah, 28 points more. It has less citadel and 1 less hull point when crippled. So it is not perfect, it can get sunk fast. It does get the protection from aerial units, which means that it counts as being 1 band range further. So you really need to be at point blank to shoot at it efficiently with gun batteries. And this guy will not let you come at point blank. It has linear dash, fine, and strategic withdrawal, which would be very efficient if it had a way to come back from reserve efficiently. You can get it to armor 7 when it becomes skimming, once every other turn. Armor 7 starts to be nice, and it becomes a fun skimming unit. You can either use it as a fast flanker, because it is fast and good, or you can keep it as a railgun carrier all the way to the back. Thanks to being aerial, it will be very hard to your opponent to deal with it with the normal weapons, except those that are dedicated anti-air units. Both work, but yeah, nothing very special about it. I would not recommend the Tunguska, maybe 1 just because it's fun, and it's, in my opinion, the most beautiful variant of all of the 3. I would have at least 1, but yeah, not the best one to put on the board. The next unit that you can build with the sprues for the aerial cruisers is the Irkutsk. And this one is already much more interesting. I mean, I love the shape of the Tunguska, but the Irkutsk is a very cool concept. It's basically a flying drill. It is a little bit cheaper actually than the Kutsov. It costs 116 per model, but it does not have any heavy gun battery. It does one thing and one thing only. It is going to drill your opponent. And to that end, you really want to put the Irkutsk in strategic reserve. This thing, like, it will get focused down. First of all, it's an aerial unit, so you will not be able to hide it behind terrain, except aerial terrain, but not many people play with aerial terrain. It's quite hard to actually make. And yeah, so this thing really wants to be in strategic reserve. You can absolutely think of making a little fleet in strategic reserves with Irkutsk. You can also put some Khatangas that are the same, like giant drills, but in surface. And you put a flagship that wants to be at point blank as well. For example, the Moskva. Let's take this example. And then you have a very good strategic reserve fleet. But otherwise, I'm afraid, like, no competent player, no half competent player will let the Irkutsk get close enough. You also get Flag Barrage 6, so it's quite cool because once you will be, let's imagine you do strategic reserve, once you will be behind the enemy lines, one way to deal with you would be to send some SRS tokens so that the main cruisers of your opponent don't have to turn around and go back. But this will protect you from SRS spam quite a little bit. Like, even if you remove 1 or 2 SRS tokens, it is going to be enough to many times remove weight of fire from this. And then the final version is the Saransk, and this one I really like. At first I didn't understand it because it has extreme range weaponries and also like point blank weapons and boarding and things that shoot in the back. And at first I was like, okay, what do I do with it? Do I put it in strategic reserve? Why? Like, how does it work? Because I wanted to use the borders. And actually, how you're supposed to play this little guy is probably, and this is my opinion, feel free to disagree, but I think this thing is meant to stay in your backline during the entire game. And why? First thing, it has heavy escort, so each sounds will give a bubble of +2 to ADV and SDV to every ship around in a bubble, and this is cumulative. So if you make 2 sounds, for example, they're going to give +4 if a ship is in range of both of them. Already very good. They also have Flag Barrage 6, the same as the Irkutsk, and again, this is cumulative. Like, it is going to be Flag Barrage 12 for the ship that you really want to protect. Already good. Each of them have 2 Katyushas. It's those that you can see here, so they can really make a fire barrage of rockets. They have rocket barrage, so a little extra dice, and rolling blanks that can really start to pile up, and you can go all the way up to 20 dices with sustained at extreme range with 2 Saransk, and that starts to be really threatening. And the cool things with the Berserkers is that you can use them to counter the enemy's submarauders or threat that would come through strategic reserves, because the sounds will be far away from the opponent, and when your opponent arrives, you can use the sounds to go there and board them with berserkers. The berserkers give hazardous to your boarding, fine. They also give devastating to your dices with the boarding, so they're really threatening. And they also have the Saransk furnace, so they shoot a big bomb in the rear, so you can just fly over an opponent, board them, give them a bomb, and still use your Katyushas on an enemy far away. This is really how I would play them. Long range, extreme range actually, fire support ships that are there also to counter your enemy's submarauders, because submarauders usually don't have that good defense against borders. Do note also that the Katyushas are limited weapons, so if you start to shoot, you have 2 sounds, you start to shoot 4 of them every turn, eventually, statistically, already at the second turn you do this, you will run out of munition on one of them. So it is very good to put the Saransk next to a source of a supply depot. You can use, for example, a platform, but not so great, but they go very good with the Prezidium, because the Prezidium is already tough. With 2 Saransk around, it is going to be almost invulnerable to extreme range firepower, to torpedoes, SRS. It's going to be very resilient. So this is the combo I would do. If you make the Irkutsk, maybe make the Moskva, so they're going to go very good in the strategic reserve fleet. Do note that you need another fleet to unlock the good bonus for the strategic reserve. So you would need to buy a little bit more models for the Commonwealth if you want to do this. Or you can build the Prezidium, and then I would recommend making Saransk to go with it. or then you can just build the Richter and give railguns to the Tunguska and just slaughter the enemy at extreme range with all of this. Everything works, and this is why I would recommend, again, to magnetize as much as you can the Moskva, Richter, and the Prezidium. And now we go to the mass ones. Those are quite interesting, especially since it is the first time we see hovercrafts. So those are quite interesting. They're a little bit expensive, especially for the Commonwealth, who have access to the very cheap Ruriks. They have 4 hull points, which is very good for a mass 1. It's quite rare to have 4 hull points on a mass 1, but remember, if your enemy breach your citadel and it's only citadel 12, then your ship is dead. There is no critical damage. If they go through citadel 12, you're down. So yeah, it is going to be a game of risk and cat and mouse with your opponent. You need to put the hovercrafts against relatively weak-ish opponents, so they don't breach your citadel too easily. Yeah, they're very good hunters for enemy mass 1s, for example. They're also very agile, and one thing to remember is that they get ablative armor, actually. So they one of the explosive dice of your opponent will not be rerolled. I mean, it will not proc another die. So it's always a good bonus. Do remember it, because I know on these small ships we tend to forget the good rules, but this is a fine rule, so do use it. The first variant that we're going to have a look at is the Gienah. This one is 48 points per model. You have 2 gun batteries or rocket batteries, whichever you prefer, and you also have a shockwave generator, which means that you really want to get close. You can put them in transport, for example the Alexiev. It's this giant chronoplan that can, for example, transport the Gienahs, something to take into consideration, or you can put them in strategic reserves. I'm not sure I would put them in Alexiev, because with shockwave generators you want to have 3 ships in order to unlock the special effect of the shockwaves, which is cumulative, and when you have 3 ships you unlock the large torrent template and not the small. So it's quite important to have at least 3 Gienahs, which is why I would put them either in strategic reserve or put them really on the flanks, because you want to arrive at point blank of your opponent with at least 3 of those. This is why it's also a good idea to buy 4 Gienahs somehow, with later boxes and stuff, to have 4 Gienahs if you play them, because this way, even if your opponent kills one of them, which is possible, they're only citadel 12, which is fine, but it happens, and then you still have 3 of them and you can unlock the large torrent. So yeah, something to take into consideration. Gienahs really want to be in large packs. Then you have the Zuber. It probably means something. It's written in all capital letters. I guess it's acronyms for something. If someone knows, please let me know. This is 55 points. Like, wow. You lose a shockwave generator, but you have an inbuilt here. You can see the little tube, inbuilt rocket battery. And of course, this means that you can have per Zuber 3 rocket batteries. So for 61 points per model, you have this very fragile and expensive ship at 61 points, but 3 rocket batteries. Like, damn. This means that I didn't make the calculation, but a pack of 4 Zubers is going to be okay, it's going to be like 244 points, but then you're going to get 12 rocket batteries. That starts to be a lot. It's more than you can get with Boyars, for example. It's so much. I'm not sure it's the best way to play it. It's really a glass cannon in this sense, but could be interesting. And the last version of the hovercraft that you can build is the Yak. This one is a transport. It's cheap. 40 points per model. Is the cheapest of all the variants, and it can be used to conquer islands because it has the landing vessel rule. We don't have rules for the scenarios that ask you to conquer islands, so we don't know how good it's going to be, but they are fast. They can be in an Alexiev, the box that has just been announced for pre-order, and this is the ship, the hovercraft that I would put in an Alexiev. Just take 2 of them. They have freight 10, basically. They can land easily on islands, and they can defend themselves with gun batteries or rocket batteries. Probably better gun batteries, actually. They're not at all defenseless. Like 2 gun batteries per ship is very fine. Like, it's a destroyer level firepower. And they have freight 10, basically. So just a single squadron of 2 of those is going to make a boarding with freight 12. It's not nothing for a small squadron like this, and it goes up to freight 16 with a full squadron, which is really like nothing to scoff at. So probably if you are only going to have 2 Hovercrafts, maybe build them as yet. Though as you've seen, like they look very similar to each other, you can absolutely proxy them as each other. But maybe just don't build all the same versions and then ask your opponent to remember which is which. If you proxy them, try to have only one type of Hovercraft in your list, so it's easier for your opponent to read. And finally, last unit in the box is going to be the Ruriks. Those are the very basic frigates. They have been here for a long time in this game, and they've had a lot of rule change. Sometimes they were very boring, sometimes they were extremely good for escorting ships. Basically what they are now, they come stock with a seismic mortar, which is fine, especially if you want, for example, to put them in escort of a Moskva, which can have some good firepower for seismic mortars, because the Moskva do boost shockwave generators and seismic mortars. So they go very good, 2 of them attached to a Moskva, and then you make one big pool of attack. This is a good way to use Ruriks. You can make a big pack of them, pack of 4, pack of 6 with the gun batteries or even seismic mortar. They are going to be a threat and relatively tanky-ish. They also have ablative armor, and you can also absolutely attach 2 of those, because they used to be like minimum size of 4, then 3, and now today they are minimum size of 2. So you can absolutely put 2 Ruriks attached to, for example, I don't know, any ship really, a Prezidium, the Rikhter even, depending on which ship you attach them to, you change the main weapons, seismic mortar, railguns, gun batteries, etc. And they're always going to be good. They're very cheap, 30 points per model. So it's basically a 60 points upgrade for a ship for a little bit more firepower, a little bit more escort and defense against borders, etc. And yeah, just very nice little escort ship that I would really play it as an escort ship now, because if you want good strong mass ones for really dealing damage to your opponent, you can have Hovercrafts, or you can even have the upgraded Rurik, that is the Boyars. You don't have them in this box, but they do exist. And talking about what doesn't exist in this box, we'll, to finish this video, have a quick talk about what other boxes you can have if you want to expand this Rikhter Battlefleet. And the number 1 box that I would recommend absolutely 100% is the Commonwealth starter set. This thing gives you basically the same thing, like exactly the same thing as you have for the Rikhter. For £5 more, you get the Borodino instead of the Rikhter, which is a little bit smaller, but it's also a mass 3 very good ship. And you get the same, like an extra 2 frontline cruisers, 2 more aerial, 2 more Hovercrafts, 4 more frigates, and 4 more escorts token. And you also have all of this for £5. So you have dices, the rulebook itself, the cards, if you don't have them, they're very important, the movement tools, the tokens. So if you're a new player and you're looking to buy 1 box for the Commonwealth, better to buy this. But if you really want the Rikhter or the Moskva because you think they're very cool, they are very good together, because then you're gonna have 4 frontline cruisers, 4 aerial, etc. It really allows you to have a good fleet at 1500 points, and even to have some extra points to make some change in the list and stuff. They both go very good. They're about 100 points, 100 pounds in total, but then you have all you need for your Russian force. Do note also, and I want to point this, the first starter set was the Hunt for the Prometheus. If you can find this, or find the Russian half of it, it was basically the Borodino and some cruisers and some Ruriks. So you would not have the Hovercrafts and the escorts and the aerial, but I've seen them being sold for quite cheap, because they've been there for years now. And if you can find this, it's a good complement as well. But the Commonwealth for £60, you don't find a better deal in the entire Dystopian Wars, and maybe in the entire wargaming community. So very good deal. The second thing you can buy, and this is much more expensive, £95, but you have so much. This is the Black Wolf Battlefleet Set. And you do have a lot of things, and the main attraction is, we see it a little bit here in the background of the artwork, it's the Murmansk mobile stronghold. It's the variants. It's currently one of the largest model in the game. Only the Iceman is larger. It's mass 5. It's absolutely massive. It's a giant donut of death. There are 3 variants you can have. The Murmansk and the Tobolsk are the classic Russian one. Murmansk is a repair platform, very good centerpiece to repair all the fleet around, good at larger point game. The Tobolsk is basically a fortress. It has everything. It has broadsides, it's bristling with weapons, cryo generator, it's launching aircrafts, it has everything. And defensive generator, like I'm not gonna make a review here, but it's such a good piece. And then you have the even upgraded version, the Anastasia, which is a named version. You can play it for the Commonwealth, but if you want to play the Black Wolf, which are mercenaries that you see here, you can absolutely play this fleet. Like every ship that you see here on the list here is playable as mercenary for other factions. So they can, if you plan later to have another faction for this game, all the mercenaries that you see here will be compatible, and you can make an extra battle fleet there to support whichever faction, the Prussian, the French, the Japanese, whichever. So it's a very good deal, and the Anastasia is basically the best of both worlds. It's bristling with railguns, cryogenerator is also launching aircrafts, it's also repairing ships around. Okay, it's about 500 points, it's extremely expensive, but it's such a good ship. And it's massive, you see it on the map, like it's really big. You have 4 Russian support cruisers also, which are those. There are 3 ways to build them. The Pravda, which is the aircraft carrier, quite small. I wouldn't recommend. They don't do much right now, like they're a bit overpriced. They're tanky-ish, but they get crippled fast. Don't build it right now, except one maybe. Though you can use, if you're building islands, the carrier, you can use just the top of the ship to make landing platforms for your islands, etc. It's very good bits that you will get for island and terrain creation. Then you have the Morozko, which is basically a Kutsov, let's say, like a tough Kutsov with a cryogenerator. So very good ship, more expensive of course. And if you have 3 Morozko, you can make the named version, which is the three Bogatirs, and those are named version with a lot of utility, quite expensive, but fun to play. And finally, my recommendation is the Khatanga, which is the most expensive ship currently. It doesn't have in the latest version the sustained cryogenerator. The Moskva has a better one, but it also has a drill, like this drill here, kind of like the Irkutsk. So if you make later on, for example, a strategic reserve battle fleet with some Irkutsk and the Moskva, as we've talked before, having 1 or 2 or 3 Khatangas is an extremely good idea. If you do that, I would recommend replacing the rear heavy gun battery with a Fury generator for boarding or a shield generator to make it even tougher to deal with. You also have 4 Stoletov Ekranoplans. It's those ships that are extremely fast, probably some of the fastest ships in the entire game, especially since if they go straight. I think they are the fastest ship in the game, like period. They are very strong damage dealers. You get only 1 variation because it's an old box. You don't have the Brawler variation, you only have the Stoletov. And it is with some Katyushas that can limited weapons, extreme range, etc. They are very good. They're basically damage dealers. They are glass cannons, very much. Skip them hidden turn 1, then rush forward, kill something, and then get killed in return. Then you have 2 Akula Grand Submarines. Those ships, you can build them either as a normal Akula, which is a torpedo submarine, very powerful, from the Ukrainian battle fleet actually, or Black Wolf Mercenary, of course, or the named version, the Deathbringer, which is this ship with the drill in the front. Again, if you want to make a big drilling fleet with the Deathbringer leading a Commonwealth fleet with some Irkutsk and Khatangas, this can be hilarious actually, and it's a very, very good ship. You have 4 Khizaks. We don't see that, but yeah, it's those. Good Mass 2 submarines, heavy torpedoes, 60 points, it's quite a deal. They are a little bit fragile though, even though they have ablative armor. They are quite fragile, they can get crippled and killed quite fast, but extreme range with torpedoes, keep them far away, and they're relatively cheap, okay? And then you have 4 Piranhas, very small, very fragile Mass 1 submarines. You can make a pack of them to go on the flank, or they can escort the Akulas or the Deathbringers, good. And then you also have 4 SRS token. Whew, that is a lot. It's 95 pounds, so of course you're gonna get a lot with it, especially like the 2 Akulas are very large submarines, and the Murmansk, it's a huge chunky piece of resin, so you have a lot of things, a lot of cruiser-sized submarines, and you have so much in this box. And the very interesting thing is it's a very good complement to the Russian fleet that you have, but it can also be played in other factions. And the very last box we'll talk about, it's the Marina Battlefleet Set, and this one for 45 pounds is a very good addition as well. It's much cheaper. You get less things, but you get these 3 very cool Russian Colossi. So those are submarauders. They are like deep strikers. There are two variants that you can have, and one of them is the Marina, which is, do we see it? It's this one on the right on the picture with the big hand and the drill. It is meant to go hand to hand. Like you keep it as a submarauder, you pop out at the beginning of the second turn. Be careful, beginning of the second turn. So be careful where you put it. It's going to be vulnerable after. Then you just drill something. You have a special attack to just grab another ship with your hand and drill it again. So you can make 2 ramming action. This is huge. Then you also have a cryo generator and stuff, and it's just a good threat on the weakest ship of your opponents. Since you can pop up anywhere on the map, you can go hunt some carriers and stuff. So very good. The other version is the Kostroma, this one with a giant railgun axe, also good with a ramming action, not as powerful. It has some railguns or gun batteries on the shoulders it can have, and then you can really have like just all the railguns all at once. I would play the Kostroma more as a defensive ship, but the same as we've talked about the Saransk. Keep it in your back line, shoot the enemy at extreme range, force the enemy to come, and if the enemy has submarauders and stuff, you can use the axe to actually go hunt them and go to make ramming actions, etc. So this is how I play. And finally in this box you have 6 Boyar frigates, and those are basically Ruriks with integrated rocket batteries. So it means you have gun battery and rocket battery, or you can of course have 2 rocket battery per Boyar. The same as what we said about the Zuber. It's very good for rocket spams. They're also good with gun batteries. They're tougher, they're more expensive of course, but I really like Boyars. They cannot unfortunately escort ships. This would really be good, but it would replace the Ruriks basically. So no, they cannot do that. But the Boyars are good ships as a pack hunter. Like they don't have pack hunters, but they're good ships on the side, on the flank, either with rocket spam or with gun batteries to keep them cheap. And this is it. Here is the picture of the Richter. You can see like how huge this cannon is. It's beautiful. It absolutely is the chandelier from Ace Combat. Okay. So I hope you found this video informative, and that now you know what to build with this box and how to expand later on. If you have any question, let us know in the comment and we will answer it as fast as we can. As always, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this type of content. It really helps us to be seen by more people and increasing the size of the community for the game. And do subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet to see more unboxing, more what to build, and more battle reports, of course. Thank you for having watched. Take care of those all around you, and until the next time, remember to keep spreading the love all around. Bye!